A lot of critical attention on The Merchant of Venice has focused, maybe more than on any other issue, on the figure of Shylock and the question of anti-Semitism. This is very reasonable, an extremely hot button issue, not just lately. Some people have spent enormous amounts of critical ingenuity trying to find ways in which to argue that Shakespeare is somehow ironizing or undercutting or satirizing the bigotry of his anti-Semitic characters. There is no question that many of the characters here, the people who are the heroes of the normal comedy marriage plot, are anti-Semites and bigots. Who even doubt that, one of them even throws in a little crude anti-African racism, in case, just when you were done building up your denial. Many critics do not want to accept the idea that Shakespeare would be a bigot or share the bigotries of his day, and quite reasonably they say it is actually, they sometimes argue that it is dangerous to surrender Shakespeare to the bigots. Other critics would say you have to face the facts. This play itself is a product of a culture that has a toxic idea about Jews and so forth. All that said, it's also the case that various Jewish critics, especially, and other Jewish readers who are not professional critics, have found great succor and support and identification with the figure of Shylock, who is allowed to speak for himself, especially in the if you prick us, do we not bleed speech, hath not a Jew eyes, who is allowed to stand up for his basic humanity and claim that he is being wronged, as he is in fact being wronged, though the play is at least two minds about that. Okay, a difficult thing. Let me walk through. In Shakespeare's England, Jews were actually legally banned from England, had been since the 13th century. That's the 1200s for you keeping track at home. They wouldn't be back until the 1650s, until the kind of Puritan interlude between kings at the end of after the English Civil War. That's a long, long time. So Jews exist for Shakespeare and his audience largely as figures of the imagination. It is not the case that there are actually no Jews in Shakespeare's London, but they're secret, they're on the down low, there aren't very many of them. But they are part of the Western European and certainly the English imagination in a crazy and pervasive way. Anti-Semitism is an ideology that really emerges in the Crusades period around the late 11th century in Europe, where at the same time as kind of European Islamophobia begins, that kind of denigrates and projects a lot of extremely strange pejorative fantasies onto Jews. People believe things about otherwise reasonable seeming people will believe the most ridiculous nonsense about Jews, things I cannot repeat on this video because it's a video on the internet and I don't want anything to be clipped and taken out of context, because there are anti-Semites running wild on YouTube right now. I have no reason to give them anything they could use for support. Forget those guys. Anti-Semitism never goes away because it's not disprovable, because it was never about facts in the beginning. None of this stuff is true. Let me say a few things. Here, Shylock is first of all imagined as Shylock is imagined as a figure of greed, a figure of kind of an Old Testament, which is the Christian name for the Hebrew Bible, a kind of Old Testament idea of justice without mercy, and a bunch of other fantasies that the Christians tend to have about Jews. And especially he's interested in commerce, and he's figured as a figure of greed. Interestingly, anti-Semitism has changed over time. So it's a shifting set of fantasies. The kind of idea that Jews were in control of business is relatively recent, and Shakespeare's generation isn't quite there yet. Let me point out one thing here. Shylock does nothing in this play for money. He does nothing in this play for money. He offers someone a no interest loan. He's not going to make any profit on this, no matter what. And then he doesn't even want his money back because he'd rather have his revenge. He is actually not a monster of economic rationalism. He is economically irrational. If the standard anti-Semitic reading of this play is like, oh yes, Shylock stands for like money and greed, whereas the Christians stand for relationships. It's not about your economic relationships. Ha 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 ha. That's certainly not true of them, but about their personal relationship, the personal connection. Everything Shylock does about that bond is about a personal connection. It's just a negative one. He presents it as, hey, it's like the pound of flesh thing. It's just a joke. It's a little gag, you know. And he says properly, what would I do with a pound of your flesh? It has no market value, right? A pound of goat flesh, that I can sell. Your flesh, pound of Antonio, not saleable. This is true. And then when he wants his revenge, he never acts for his economic benefit, which is not something you can say about the Christians. They're after their own economic benefit all the damned time. This play also buys into a Christian idea of Judaism, which is called Supersessionism, from the word to supersede. In this idea, Judaism exists as a precursor, a kind of necessary foundation for the Christian religion, which then supersedes them. This is a fabulous way of looking at Judaism if you're a Christian. It really suits your Christian's ideas, whereby this other religion is merely here as a foundation for their religion. Let me put it this way. If you're a Christian, you just enjoyed that argument, you really feel attention to you. What if I said this? Of the three Abrahamic religions, Judaism is the first stage in which we build Christianity, which is itself merely a stage for Islam. How do you like the argument now? You have issues about Islam? Fine. Let me say another way, Mormonism. Yes, does that make it better? I'm not here to promote either Islam or Mormonism or Christianity or Judaism. Certainly not Mormonism. I need a cup of coffee really right now. Jews, understandably, don't view their religion as just simply Christianity 1.0 or pre-Christianity. They view their religion as its own thing. I would also point out that Christians' views on the Hebrew Bible tend to be influenced heavily by the fact that Christianity takes those scriptures and throws away the thousands of years of commentary. That's right, thousands of years of commentary. Remember, by the Jewish calendar, this is the 58th century. Throws away the 1,000 years of commentary that explains it. So the idea that like Jews don't value mercy is more plausible when you're reading kind of Torah without Talmud, without any of the rabbinical interpretation that has guided people in interpreting Jews and interpreting the Torah for thousands of years. One thing to look for in Merchant of Venice in the supersessionist fantasy is references to the biblical story of Jacob and Esau, another story that Christians have taken from the Hebrew Bible, from the book of Genesis, and used in their own way. Obviously, in the book of Genesis, Jacob and Esau are brothers. Esau is the older one and is the father's favorite. Jacob tricks their old blind father into mistaking him for Esau and giving him the blessing, the one and only blessing, the birthright. For Christians in Shakespeare's time, and sometimes still, this is a story about how the birthright, the blessing, the chosenness moves from the firstborn, right here, the Jews, on down to the second born here, the Christians. I'm not advocating that story either. Oh, certainly I'm not. But I want you to know that Shakespeare's audience is key to see that. So the Jacob and Esau story is very, very interesting to them. I would add two things, but to imagine themselves as Jacob is bizarre. Jacob is the founding father, the single founding father of the Jewish people. He is Israel. That is his other name, given to him by the God of the Israelites. The Israelites are the descendants of Jacob. So somehow the Christians in this play want to imagine themselves as the real Israel, as the real chosen people. On the other hand, their pretenses about money and lack of self-interest really don't hold up. That's another video.